Caseus. Jedi Exile. Chapter 9. The next day, Caseus got up early as he did every morning. After fixing himself some breakfast, he sat down to eat. Sabo joined him after a minute and sat with his mug in his hand and a fork in the other.
We're running low on that fertilizer we've been using. If you're heading to town today, be sure to pick some up.
I'll contact Kala. Have her pick some up when she brings Liara over for her lessons. Taking a bite of his eggs, Caseus looked up as Sabo stared at him with raised eyebrows. What?
I thought you were done with that time in your life.
I am. But Liara needs to learn the basics.
I think it's a bad idea. The more she learns, the more she's going to want to know about who you are.
I know, Sabo. I already talked to Kala about this. She won't know anything about the Jedi or my past. She's going to be fine.
You say that now.
You think I would intentionally lead that girl into trouble?
I think, from what you've told me about your past, trouble seems to have a nasty habit of finding you. And if it comes knocking, you can't drag her into it.
So what? I should just let the whole thing be? Let her live her life until her powers get her into trouble? What if I'm not around to protect her when that happens? Kala is aware of the risk. And so am I.
But is Liara aware? Does she know that the Empire hunts people like you and her?
She doesn't need to know that yet.
Then when does she?
When she's older. When she's in control of her abilities and knows how to hide them. I know you think this is a bad idea. But my mind is made up. That trip I took to the old Enclave the other day. That voice told me,
Oh, so we're going off of voices now. Is that it? I'm not talking about Jedi visions of voices in your head, Caseus. I'm talking about reality.
And what exactly is that reality?
She's not safe around you. And you training her isn't going to help. You're falling back into your Jedi philosophy. And where are the Jedi now, boy?
Caseus stared at Sabo and stood, pushing his plate away before going outside to take care of his work, leaving Sabo shaking his head in disappointment. Ever since Caseus told him about training Liara, he'd been nothing but apprehensive to the idea. Sabo felt that any part of Caseus' life that revolved around the Jedi would only lead to trouble. But it was a part of Caseus. And it was a part of himself he'd never be able to sever or repress. No amount of hiding could change who he was. He had a responsibility to teach Liara what she needed to know, if she was ever going to be safe from the Empire. What was he supposed to do? If he ignored it, Liara's powers would reveal themselves sooner or later, and draw attention to her, and by proxy, draw attention to Caseus. This wasn't something that could be ignored, as much as he wanted to. And part of him didn't want to. Part of him wanted to teach her everything, to train her properly, to make sure the light of the Jedi didn't die out. For all he knew, he could be the only one left by this point. If he was, the burden would be on his shoulders to keep the Jedi alive and prevent their total extinction. But another part of him had already given up hope. A little voice in his head told him that Sabo was right, and there was no place in the galaxy for the Jedi anymore. He wished he could talk to Master Yoda. He'd have an answer. Even if it wasn't one he wanted to hear. At the very least, he'd have something to go off of. But Yoda wasn't here. There were no other people in his position. Jedi who could relate to his struggles and situations. The only person he could consult with any insight was himself. And he didn't consider himself all that insightful. Caseus went throughout his day and completed his chores. When the afternoon arrived, he put away his tools just in time to see Kala and Liara arriving in their speeder. Liara hopped out and said goodbye to Kala, who smiled at Caseus before driving back into town.
Hi, Caseus.
Liara? Ready for your next lesson?
Yeah. Do I get to hit the rocks this time?
Patience, Liara. That's the key. Learning to use your gifts takes dedication and commitment. It's not something that can be learned in a day. Follow me. Liara sulked a bit, but followed as they went out into the field. Have a seat. Liara sat with her legs crossed as Caseus sat across from her. You remember what we talked about yesterday? About the Force?
Yeah, that energy that lives in my blood and makes things warm.
Caseus sighed. Good to see you were taking notes. No. The Force is the energy that surrounds us and binds all living things together in a delicate balance. But the way in which we can tap into its power is nearly limitless. Caseus held out his hand and floated a stone from the ground. Liara gasped and stared in awe as Caseus slowly twirled it in his hand.
How are you doing that?
Among the many gifts the Force provides to people like us is the ability to manipulate and move objects without touching them. That's what we're going to focus on first. Caseus let the rock fall into his hand and placed it in front of her. First, I want you to breathe. In and out. Clear your mind and focus. Liara did as she was told and slowly breathed in and out. Picture the stone in your head. When you have a clear image of it, I want you to reach out. Picture it lifting off the ground and make it happen. Liara closed her eyes tight, picturing the stone in her mind, and reached out her hand trying to make it float. The stone, however, stayed completely immobile, as Liara shut her eyes tighter and puffed her cheeks, trying even harder. Easy. Don't strain yourself. Breathe and focus. Liara kept breathing and kept trying.
It's not working.
Caseus stroked his chin and had an idea. Liara, do you have that little cube with you? Liara nodded and reached into her pocket, pulling out the blue cube and handing it over. This isn't just a trinket. These were designed to help very young children with the Force hone their abilities. You have a connection to this toy. You carry it with you. You know it like the back of your hand. Caseus placed the cube on the ground and carefully tied a piece of cloth around her eyes, blocking her sight. I want you to picture it in your mind. Visualize it moving from the ground to your hand. Then make it happen.
Okay.
Liara took deep breaths in and out slowly, and pictured the cube in her mind. It was her favorite thing she owned. So small and simple. But she always kept it with her. Inside her head, she could see it on the grass. The faded blue paint that had begun to chip away at the corners. The little scratch on the bottom where she dropped it years ago. Reaching out, she concentrated and thought about floating it from the grass. Caseus watched intently as the cube slowly began to shake and rise from the grass. He smiled widely as it very slowly moved from the ground and gently into Liara's outstretched hand. Removing her blindfold, Liara's face was overcome with excitement.
I did it!
You did. With time, you'll be able to lift bigger things. Things you wouldn't imagine. But remember, it's not all about lifting things with your mind. There's a discipline involved.
What does that mean?
Think about it this way. If I wanted to, I could live the rest of my life without having to lift a finger. If I wanted to, I could coast through life just letting the Force do all my heavy lifting and my chores. But what happens to my body then? My muscles, my arms and legs.
I guess you wouldn't be very strong?
Exactly. Physical strength is also important in life, even with the Force. It's important to exercise your body just like your mind. Caseus stood and fell forward, balancing on his hands as Liara looked closely. This is an exercise I used to do when I was your age. Just like with the Force, it requires balance and control. Removing one of his hands, Caseus stood just on his right hand, as Liara's eyes widened. Standing up, Caseus stretched out and dusted off his shirt. Now you try. I'll help you. Liara uneasily placed her hands on the ground as Caseus took her by the feet and gently hoisted her up as she stood on her hands. I'm going to let go, all right? If you fall, we'll try again.
Okay.
Gently, Caseus let go as Liara maintained her balance for a few moments before tumbling over.
Ow!
Don't worry. You're learning. All this stuff will come naturally in time. Caseus and Liara spent the better half of a few hours on this exercise. By the time they were finished, Liara was able to keep her balance for around 7 seconds before falling. Her arms were tired as she sat and rubbed them. I think that's a good place to stop for now. Let's take a break. Reaching into his bag, Caseus pulled out 2 pieces of fruit and handed one to Liara as they ate.
Caseus? You said there are bad people out there who don't like us. Why do these people not like us? You seem nice. And I'm nice. Usually.
Caseus looked at Liara. He remembered a time when he was that innocent. Well, they don't like that we try to help people with our gifts. The people that don't like us want to be in control of everyone. They want power. But abusing your power by hurting innocent people is wrong. And so we help those who can't help themselves. And we don't let other people get hurt if we can help them. When you learn to use your power, Liara, it can be easy to think of yourself as better than everyone else. But it's because you have these abilities that you need to remember that you have a duty to help them rather than to hurt them.
Okay.
After they had finished their snack, Caseus continued to run Liara through simple exercises and drills. She was learning fast. Soon, Kala arrived and Caseus spoke with her again and told her about Liara's progress. He could see she was still nervous, but proud of her daughter for what she was accomplishing. After saying goodbye, Caseus went back into the field and meditated. On Iridonia, Shara stepped into a bar accompanied by 2 stormtroopers on either side of her. The patrons quickly cleared the way as Shara walked through to the back room, where an Imperial officer waited. Sir, we have secured the informant. He claims to know where this Jedi is. Shara looked over and saw a pathetic man with scars covering his body and chunks of skin missing and replaced with metal and plastic. Around his neck, a very uncomfortable-looking device that allowed him to breathe. His name is Zolin, and he's quite eager to share. Shara looked at the pitiful fool in amusement.
This mangled fool knows something of a Jedi?
So he believes. Shara sat across from Zolin.
Tell me where I can find them.
Zolin let out a raspy gurgle. I'm afraid he's unable to talk, sir. Bad encounter with some wildlife.
Then write it down. I'm losing my patience.
The officer handed Zolin paper and a pen as he took them and began spelling out something. Shara looked closely at Zolin's wounds. If a Jedi did this to him. Zolin handed the paper to the officer. Dantooine.
Dantooine, of course. The Jedi have a history with that planet, don't they? What is this Jedi's name?
Zolin scowled and shrugged, going back to his drink. Shara stood.
Very well. Looks like we'll have to draw him out.
Sir, Dantooine is a patch of nothing in this dead corner of the galaxy. Only farmers and merchants inhabit its wastes. If a Jedi is hiding there, how do you intend to draw them out of hiding?
If there's one thing I know about the Jedi, it's that they hopelessly cling to their code. They can't turn a blind eye to the suffering of the innocent. All it takes is a little pressure. Prepare my ship. We leave at once.